Welcome to this series, The Foundational Questions of Our Time, brought to you by Synergy Circles of the Evolutionary Leaders, specifically the Integral and Holistic Cosmology Synergy Circle and the Cornerstone Synergy Circle. These discussions feature global thought leaders dialoguing with renowned author Riane Eisler on how their transformational work relates to Dr. Eisler's four cornerstones of how we transform cultures from domination consciousness to partnership consciousness, crucial for these challenging times. I'm Dr. Kurt Johnson of Light on Light Publications and Media. Each video will engage Dr. Eisler in a discussion with a global thought leader introduced immediately after this initial introduction of Riane Eisler. Riane Eisler, JD, PhD, is a best-selling author, systems scientist, futurist, cultural historian, and attorney, whose work shows how to build a more equitable, sustainable, and less violent world. Her famous book, The Chalice and the Blade, Our History, Our Future, is now in 57 US printings and 30 foreign editions. Dr. Eisler is president of the Center for Partnership Systems, CPS, and editor-in-chief of the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies at the University of Minnesota. She is also the author of Nurturing Our Humanity, How Domination and Partnership Structure Our Brains, Lives, and Future, co-authored with anthropologist Dr. Douglas Fry, Oxford University Press, 2019, and The Real Wealth of Nations, Creating a Caring Economics, hailed by Nobel Peace Laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu as the template for the better world that we are so urgently seeking. In short, according to dictionaries, a domination hierarchy is a social hierarchy arising when interaction of members of a social system creates a ranking system. Such rankings of who are favored can involve gender, race, economic status, and so on. Dr. Eisler's four cornerstones of how we shift from domination consciousness to partnership consciousness are these, and we invite you to hear our first video with Dr. Eisler in which she elaborates these four elements. The first cornerstone is childhood. The second cornerstone is the attitude toward gender. The third cornerstone is economics, and the fourth cornerstone is story and language. So let's go over now to introduce our guest for this episode. So welcome. We've had a special opportunity to time this episode with the 2023 World Interfaith Harmony Week. It's an international holiday of the United Nations that's celebrated through the first week of February. And this year's theme is Everyone Belongs. And you can find out more at un.org and at worldinterfaithharmonyweek.com. Our special guest in this regard is Ben Bowler, the executive director of UNITY EARTH. Both Ben and UNITY EARTH are major participants in not only World Interfaith Harmony Week, but annually sponsor multiple global events like the World Unity Week. And for that, see worldunityweek.org. And this year, exactly at this time, their UNITY EARTH Symposium, Visions for a New Earth. In turn, they'll be following on another set of guests that we'll be featuring in this series from the Igniting the Holomovement in association with the Evolutionary Leaders in March, with UNITY EARTH sponsoring at the Los Angeles Wise Dome on March 28th, the LA Convergence event. So find out more about that at unity.earth. That's unity.earth. Now, the Synergy Circles of the Evolutionary Leaders are, of course, the sponsors of this series, the foundational questions of our time with Dr. Riane Eisler, who we just introduced a moment ago. So what could be more fitting for the discussion of the implications of Dr. Eisler's four cornerstones for moving from dominance to partnership consciousness than World Interfaith Harmony Week, this year's theme, Everyone Belongs, and Ben and the UNITY EARTH Symposium, Visions for a New Earth. So Ben is also the co-founder of the Evolutionary Leaders Unity and Peace Synergy Circle, and he and Riane are also contributors to the forthcoming book for the Uniting the Holomovement event. And that book is entitled The Holomovement, Embracing Our Collective Purpose to Unite Humanity. And Riane's chapter in that book is precisely entitled The Human Transition from Dominance to Partnership, the Four Cornerstones. So welcome, Ben and Riane, and I pass the baton now to Riane Eisler to introduce Ben Bowler.
Well, it's a real pleasure, Ben, to have this opportunity to talk with you about, well, our common work.
Wonderful, Riane. Well, it's an honor for me to be here with you as part of this very important series, and just to underscore the crucial importance of the work that you are bringing forward and have done for so many decades now, as we figure out how to transition from hierarchies of dominance into a partnership model. So it's a real honor for me to be here with you.
Well, thank you. And I think that your work focusing on a world of peace is such an important piece of the movement from domination to partnership. And what it really says to me is what an important conversation this will be.
Well, absolutely. And Riane, you know, I can just strongly really endorse that everything that we have done as Unity Earth and before, even in other projects that predate Unity Earth, my whole experience of this work has entirely been done and manifest through relationships and through your vision of partnership and, you know, the co-creative model, which we can say, you know, is very evident in nature as well, of how things come together in a larger ecosystem. But this idea of partnership is at the very heart. Let me take you back 2009, when we were living in Thailand. And one of the key things that really initiated me, I suppose, on this journey of interspiritual discovery, which led me to first have Dr. Kurt Johnson's book a few years later, and then having the honor and privilege of meeting him some years after that. But what it was that really initiated that was a partnership with a local Thai Buddhist abbot in a remote part of Thailand where we were living. And he had a vision that he wanted to open up his temple for foreigners to come. And I'd been living there for a year or two, and I saw in the Thai culture, the tradition of Thai men in particular, used to be women as well, but that tradition has faded, sadly. But for Thai men to take this temporary ordination into the temple as monks. And so I had the inspiration one day and said to him, how about if we open this up to foreigners and allow people to come and take this deep dive into Theravada Buddhism? Came up with a catchy name, Monk for a Month. But he loved it, and it was very much aligned with what he wanted to do. So out of that project was born. And in some ways, that was really the beginning, at least from my perspective, Riane, of what's gone on to become Unity Earth. From those early days of Monk for a Month, we had hundreds of people from around the world coming and taking a deep, authentic dive into that tradition, wearing the robes, doing the alms rounds, very authentic. After that, we then established a program in Turkey called Muslim for a Month. And we had Jews and atheists and Christians and agnostics and different people coming together, staying in the old Sufi lodge in Istanbul, and then going on into learning how to pray at the mosques and going all the way to Konya, where Mevlana Rumi's mausoleum is, an extraordinary place. Again, that was all done through partnerships with the local Islamic group. But starting with that first partnership in Thailand, ever since then has been the model for everything that we've done. When Kurt and I met, and then out of that, a whole series of things, including Derek Grimm and a bunch of other people, emerged this idea which became Unity Earth. So just wanted to underscore how essential what we do in collaboration and in that spirit of partnership, friendship, relationship has been at the very essence of everything that's emerged for us over the last 10 years or more.
Well, and certainly collaboration is a very important part of moving from domination to partnership. Unfortunately, it's not enough, though. And what we provide through my work, through my books, through the Chalice and the Blade, all the way to the Real Wealth of Nations, which I think you'd find very interesting, Ben, because its focus is on moving beyond capitalism and socialism. I mean, we need markets, but we don't happen to have a free market. We need enlightened global policies, but the values that drive our economic system are not partnership values. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in either capitalism or socialism about caring for nature.
Yes.
Nothing. Nature is there to be exploited, according to both Smith and Marx. Moreover, and this is fundamental, and it's something that we really, I think, in our larger frame, provide a much more inclusive frame in moving. If you really think about Smith and Marx, for them, the work of caring for people, starting at birth and caring for the elderly, the sick, keeping a clean and healthy home environment, which of course translates also into keeping a clean and healthy planetary environment. But this was supposed to be done for free by a woman in a male-controlled household. And that relegation of care work in the three life-sustaining sectors, in the natural economy, the volunteer community economy, which you are certainly a huge part of, and in the household economy, to just being reproductive work, is unfortunately still taught in our economic schools, but worse than that, GDP and GNP perpetuate that, mm-hmm. so that it does not measure what really counts. And especially in our post-industrial knowledge service era, this not caring for people, and not to speak of climate change, of course, which is a huge danger to humanity and to all species on our planet. You can't just keep adding on to systems that came out of, well, first of all, they came out of early industrial times, okay? And we're now in the 1700s, the 1800s, so they're antiquated. But the fact that they perpetuate this system of domination values, mm-hmm. of the ranking of anything stereotypically, because it's very gender rigid, gender stereotypes here, associated with masculinity, real masculinity, conquest, domination, over anything stereotypically associated with femininity, with women's work, caring for people, caring for nature, etc. It's not sustainable. We need to move to a caring economics of partnerism. And that's one of the four cornerstones, as you know. Mm-hmm. But all the cornerstones are related. And the first one is, of course, gender and childhood. Mm-hmm. And in my most recent book, which is Nurturing Our Humanity, which came out with Oxford University Press in 2019, it draws heavily from neuroscience. And what it shows is that what children observe or experience in their first 5 years shapes nothing less than the architecture of our brains.
Mm-hmm.
And with this, how we feel, how we think, how we act, and how we vote then. And people who grow up in domination families were, well, I'll give you an example. Putin in 2018 radically, substantially reduced the penalty for family violence.
Mm-hmm.
So in Russia today, if you hurt or kill a family member, a woman, a child, even, a man, it is much less than if you hurt or kill a stranger. Now, why? Because those who are pushing us back, whether it's a Putin in Russia, whether the strongmen rulers, whether it's religious or secular, like the Taliban, or Iran, or the rightist fundamentalist alliance, they get what Putin gets, that a punitive, violent, highly strongman-oriented authoritarian state rests on a highly punitive, authoritarian, very violent family.
Mm-hmm.
And gender is, of course, another cornerstone, and story and language is the fourth, as you know. So we offer a larger frame, because what the problem that we face, all of us who are working for this better future, more equitable, more peaceful, more sustainable in all respects, is that the people pushing us back to more rigid domination times have invariably focused on these four cornerstones. Mm-hmm. And that's on which regressions after regression after regression has kept rebuilding itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Riane, thank you for that vista that of your work, your current work, and congratulations on the most recent book from 2019, Nurturing Our Humanity. And also, I would love to dig a little deeper into the real wealth of nations. Let me ask you something about religion, because we're here, it's World Interfaith Harmony Week. We're celebrating that. It's been a very generative space for us as Unity Earth and our community globally over the last so many years, from events we did in Ethiopia and the Rift Valley, and even in New York with Dr. Johnson at the United Palace in 2019, and then across the Holy Land in 2020. And it strikes me that we can look at the evolutionary aspects of religion, and we can see where what you might call the progressive elements are focusing on correcting the gender imbalance, being certainly child, celebrating the child as well, understanding a just economics, and having story and language which is life affirming, and which is really focused on improving the earth rather than hoping to get to a better place after death, which is a more simple story. But I think we can look at the progressive aspects of religion and say, yes, they are moving forward across these four cornerstones. My question, Riane, for you is, what would be your advice to progressive religionists or progressive people in general about how best to evolve the fundamental aspects of religion that are stuck in those old stories, that are very much in a hierarchical domination, patriarchy, male-dominated? The environment is there to be used and abused, and really caught up in those old stories and languages.
Well, I'm working with Kurt and with other evolutionary leaders on precisely that. At the core of all the world faiths, really, are partnership teachings. I mean, what caring, caregiving, Jesus stopped the stoning of a woman, associated freely with women, which was a heresy in his time. Mm-hmm. I tried to provide food for people, nurturing. It wasn't just what he preached, but what he modeled. And yet, in the course of domination history, after the shift, because for millennia, as you know, I think from just what you know about the chalice and the blade, it documents really, and even going further back to foraging societies, for most of our cultural history as humans, we lived in societies that oriented more to the partnership end. Now, after the shift, this core of all these partnership, if you will, feminine, soft teachings, okay?
Yes.
Was encrusted, like a beautiful painting that is painted over in the course of history. And we have these horrible teachings of, stone her to death, take every virgin for yourself, kill everybody. I mean, Armageddon, whatever that means. But that's not the core. So the project that we're working on, and I really invite you to be part of it, is sorting the grain from the chaff. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to get together religious people with authority from all the world's faiths to really examine the history of religion, because religion doesn't just appear without a cultural background, for goodness sakes. But the core teachings are partnership teachings. And so if we can reclaim these and really show people how and why you have these terrible teachings. Why is very simple. The church, for example, after Jesus was crucified, became an ally of the Roman Empire, and it started to persecute competing sects, period, yes. Violently, killing heretics, quote unquote. So I think this is a very vital project, because unless we really keep pointing to the wisdom teachings, which really so many faiths have in common, as you said earlier, it was both women and men who could become priests, and then there was domination history, and that changed, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the Gnostic Gospels, for example, and I don't know if you have, it's fascinating, because the first followers of Jesus, the first Jews and then Christians, including the Gentile, were peaceful, gender balanced, egalitarian. Yeah. And I make a distinction, by the way, in my work between hierarchies of domination and hierarchies of actualization. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very important, because otherwise people get stuck in this notion that it all has to be completely level. And it can't be. There have to be loci of responsibility. Mm-hmm. 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 But what do you think of this project?
Oh, I think that's extremely important. I know that Kurt and others have done a lot of work with Ken Wilber about moving along the conveyor belt through the various developmental stages, and it seems like it's quite resonant with that. I love the idea of really changing the story, Riane. It's interesting you mentioned Armageddon, of all things, because one of the most powerful things we ever did as Unity Earth was go to Megiddo in World Interfaith Harmony Week 3 years ago, 2020, right before the world got shut down. And we had indigenous leaders from Australia, from North America, from Asia, as well as religious leaders and spiritual, but not necessarily traditional people, and musicians and artists and leaders from all different organizations come together, about 100 people across the Holy Land. But the high point was on the hill of Megiddo, which is Megiddo, where the origin of the word Armageddon comes from. And we were there with the deliberate intention to change the story. And Arnie Pat McCabe from the Navajo people led a water ceremony, led a beautiful, feminine, integrated with earth ceremony. And she said, expressly declared that we were there to change that old story into something new. And wouldn't you know it, then the following week or two, the whole world changed. So it's, I think, the idea and the essence of the power of really getting these narratives at the essence of them. And I think you're absolutely right. We have truth on our side, in the essence that the teachings of the founders of all these religions, and of course, Kurt has been one of the pioneers in this field of interspiritual dialogue. We have so many champions from both sexes, old and young, and intercultural and intergenerational, that have really spoken this song of unity, of harmony, of giving more than we seek to receive, which is the antithesis of the domination paradigm. So I think you're absolutely onto something with this project, and I would be love to participate however I can.
Well, I'm delighted about that, because I think that as long as our scriptures, and by our, I mean not only Judeo-Christian or Muslim, but everybody's scriptures can be used to say, see, I mean, here, you know, it says here that women have to obey and that men can hit them. And, you know, I mean, all this stuff that came, the encrustment, really, that is being used against us.
Yes.
In the name of religion. And we really have to stop that.
Yeah.
And the idea came to me that we could do this, and I'm so sorry because I forgot to turn off my cell phone.
It's okay.
I think that the problem is the encrustment.
Yes.
That came, and if people understand that this is not the real teaching of their core values, that their core values for most people are caring, is important. But then why do we insist, for example, that any profession that is labeled feminine will be paid less? And then most of the caring professions have as the bulk of their workers women. So it has to change. We have to change the values. We have some tools that you may find of use in your work. One of them is a way of measuring what values we consciously and unconsciously are perpetuating. And when you talked about story, I thought of our we got a grant from the Ford Foundation to develop a partnership technology toolkit and workbook.
Wow, excellent.
And it can be adapted for any purpose. It's based on the 4 cornerstones plus 2 more. One, of course, is an environment, because, you know, it's critical. And the other, because racism is such a problem, especially in the United States, is racism. But I can send you a link to it. And I think that you could adapt it for your peace studies.
I would love to.
Because what it is, it asks us to examine, I mean, what are our basic assumptions, conscious or unconscious? And that is based on decades of research on what is it that we have to build to shift from domination to partnership. If we are to have peace, if we are to have equity, if we are to have environmental sustainability, you can't just, I spoke to the United Nations General Assembly on a session on harmony with nature. And I said, what sounds obvious, you can't just tack on harmony with nature to a fundamentally imbalanced system. You have to have systems change. And this is where I think your synchronicity really is so related to this work of identifying what do we have to build. Aside from all, because there are so many, I mean, the proliferation of non-governmental organizations, as well in both the non-religious, secular, and the religious area, is huge.
Yeah.
But we need a frame.
Yeah.
And it's not right versus left, or capitalism versus socialism, or East versus West, or North versus South. They fragment our consciousness. You know that there have been repressive, regressive, violent regimes in all these categories. And not only that, they marginalize or just ignore the majority of humanity, women and children. And if you don't connect the dots like Putin did, like the Taliban do, we have to take it from their playbook.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think that's extremely, extremely valid and important. The framework that you're working on and are offering, Riane, is definitely something that the world needs. And so whatever we can do to support that, there are as you say, this proliferation of civil societies is definitely a great white hope. And yet there is, until now, a lack of coordination, a lack of synergy. Part of the efforts of what's happening with the Holomovement, that were also, both contributors to the book, but beyond that, the work of the Holomovement is an initiative to engender more synergy and collaboration between many of those groups. The work of Dr. Shelley Ostroff in Jerusalem with eco-governance is another noteworthy one. I would love to learn more, and I would love to get your tools. I think we need tools. And I think one thing I just want to, perhaps a final question I have, Riane, for you is, there is a reason why regressive, as you say, fundamentalism, radicalization, that there is a reason why it's so compelling. There's something in that story of being told that we are the select group, we are the elect group, we are the right faith, we are the right gender, we belong to something powerful and holy and ordained by the highest power in the universe. There's something compelling about that. I suppose often it's a sense of brotherhood that draws people into that. My question is, how, in your research and your thinking and your dreaming into this, how can we tell a better story, a more attractive story, a more compelling, even more seductive story than what has been so powerful for the fundamentalist religions?
Well, first of all, I really urge you to read Nurturing Our Humanity, because the people who really go for this, it's not so much that it's a compelling story, but it's a fear-based story, God-fearing, authorities fearing. I'm going to lose my job if I don't. I mean, the economy is supposed to be for us, not us for the economy, right? Yeah. In the family is where it starts. So childhood and the ranking of male over female is so ingrained in all of us. The marginalization. I mean, gender happens to be a profound economic and social organizing principle. Remember what I told you about caring economics and that it left out the 3 life-sustaining sectors? That's a gendered system of values. Mother Earth, right? So I think that we're all working on that story, but it isn't just one story. For people like you and I, who are really yearning and know that there is a better alternative, because the partnership system is not only better in being more just, more caring, more sustainable, etc., it's more effective. And people are learning that today. But for people who are stuck in the old story, some of them are rebelling, but they don't know what they're rebelling against. They're rebelling against all the wrong things, against the government. No, it's a systemic problem. And there are some of them that we can tell a better story to. And I'm working with a group that is very much in the business of changing the story. But it isn't one story. That's what I wanted to say. It's a whole bunch of different stories. For those of us who are working for a partnership future, I think the story is, look, That is the original direction of human culture. That is actually what neuroscience shows. You know that the so-called pleasure centers in our brains, they light up more when we share and care than when we win and dominate. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's part of the story for us, but it's not the same story mm-hmm. for the people who are really indoctrinated in fear. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough one, mm-hmm. because I agree with you that it can be interpreted that it's a very compelling story, but it's really in-group versus out-group thinking. Yes. That they're into, starting with the in-group of mankind and the female other. Yeah. And so there's always an enemy who's to blame. Yeah. It's an out-group. It's whoever the authority figure tells them it is. That yes. is what the problem consists of. Okay, wonderful. Well, Riane, thank you so much. You're educating me already. I have a proposal for us to finish on in our demonstration of partnership here. I will get your latest book, Nurturing Our Humanity, and I will read it before June. But I would like to invite you to come and participate as an ambassador and to share with us in World Unity Week in June, which is orientated around the mid-year solstice, summer in the north, winter here in the south, which brings in a lot of indigenous ceremony, but it's also UN World Refugee Day on June 20. It's International Day of Yoga on June 21. It's the signing of the UN Charter in 1945 was on June 25th. So there's a lot that's packed into that little sort of 7 or 8 day period around the solstice. We'd love to feature you. Obviously, we'll go through Kurt and figure that out, but we'd love to have you share more of this wisdom and your findings and your work through the platform of World Unity Week. And I will read your latest book between now and then. And I will be delighted to do that. Your invitation, I'm delighted to accept it. And I will also send you a short article on partnership economics, on caring economics of partnerism, because if we don't change our reward system, yes. we are rewarding all the wrong things, for goodness sakes. Yes. Yes. So, and I want to close with something, just to give you an idea. We have been working on a new metric that, unlike both GDP and other so-called GDP alternatives, shows the economic value of the work of caring for people, starting at birth, and caring for our natural life support system. In other words, it's not just a snapshot, but it shows what investments make a difference. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to consider that as something that we can really get energy and resources and organizations behind, because the time is now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Riane. Thank you for everything you're bringing forward, and thank you for your life's work and ongoing contribution. It's been a real honor, and I look forward to more as we partner together in this great dance of life for a better future for all. Well, it's such a pleasure and honor to be with you, Ben. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Riane Eisler, and to our viewers. Each of the subsequent videos in this important video series will feature global thought leaders and activists discussing their work in the context of the Four Cornerstones with Dr. Eisler. And you can update yourself regularly on the series at the websites that will be posted just hereafter. And these include lightonlight.us, centerforpartnership.org, evolutionaryleaders.net, and the Sacred Stories channel at YouTube. That's YouTube at the Sacred Stories channel. Thank you for joining us, and please tell your colleagues about this important video series. This is Dr. Kurt Johnson of Light on Light Media and of the Synergy Circles of the Evolutionary Leaders, a project of the Source of Synergy Foundation. And please also see our emerging work at holomovement.org. That's HOLO movement.org.